Welcome to Box Overtake, a Formula One podcast where we give you a casual but informative glance into this monumental motorsport, from the happenings around the pit box to the overtakes on the track. I am Matt, your host, and today we'll be going over the four races that have happened so far in the 2025 season, and you do not want to miss it. So without further ado, let us start off with the first race of the season, the Australian Grand Prix. The Australian Grand Prix was the first race of the season. It was also a wet race, and considering that there were a bunch of rookies on track and it was the first race of the season, there was bound to be some chaos. I would like to, before getting into everything for this video, introduce the concept of what leads to success in Formula One. So ultimately, it's a widely held belief that success in a race is 70% car and 30% driver. Effectively, if you have a fast car, you're going to outperform people in slower cars. It's fairly easy, I guess you could say, logic to see through. But that 30% driver really helps a little bit when it gets to Formula One, because all the cars are like within a second of each other usually. And hopefully, if they aren't, that's fairly slow. Being within like a tenth of a second, less than a tenth of a second, is like considered, the cars are basically the same speed, of course, but that 30% driver can really help pull it off. But in a wet race, which was the Australian Grand Prix, that is completely flipped around. All the cars effectively sacrifice speed and downforce for more traction and a safer race for the car, and effectively the team with the most skilled driver is more than likely going to come out on top, because the driver can pull more out of the car when it is in the wet. This ultimately leads us to the events of the Australian Grand Prix. It is expected that rookies would have a harder time in the wet and would struggle. Unfortunately, Hadjar and Doohan were the first two to deliver, as they both exited early. Kimi was maybe the only one that really didn't struggle with it, but then again, he's in a Mercedes. In addition to that, Gabriel Bortoleto and Liam Lawson crashed towards the end of the race. Fernando Alonso also spun. Sainz also had a technical issue and had a crash early in the race. And overall, it was an interesting race, mainly due to the rain. Sorry about that. Norris secured the win of the first race, with Max Verstappen and George Russell rounding out the rest of the podium in that order for second and third. That was basically Australia. So now let's get to the race in China. The next race weekend in China was a sprint race weekend, so that means they had two races. The first sprint race was interesting. It saw Hamilton bring home Ferrari's first ever sprint race win. He finished in first on Saturday, and Piastri and Verstappen rounded out positions 2 and 3 on the sprint race podium. Of course, the success of Ferrari could not stay for long, as the roller coaster came into effect, as I said earlier. Race started out maybe a little bit unusual for Ferrari. Charles Leclerc broke his front wing on Lewis Hamilton, his teammate. Somehow that did not negatively affect the car, and he actually found better pacing and time out of it, which is weird. Anyway, they ended up swapping positions on track, but by the end of the race, both were disqualified. Leclerc for parc ferme, for specifically, he was found under the minimum weight requirement by 1 kilogram and competed with a missing end plate. Hamilton got disqualified because he breached technical regulations, as his rear skid plate at the bottom of the car wore below minimum thickness. Effectively, at the bottom of the car, there's a skid plate, and it's mainly for the safety of the vehicle and driver, and it has to have a minimum thickness for it. It has to have a thickness to it to protect the driver effectively, and shaving it down can increase performance, but also some other things within it. And so the plate at the plank of wood at the bottom of the car has to be within a certain wear by the end of the race. If there's more wear making it smaller, then that can of course affect race results and be possibly detrimental. So yeah, Ferrari dropped from their respective 5th and 6th ending positions. In addition to this, Gasly from Alpine was also disqualified for a similar thing to, I believe, Leclerc with the end plate. So the Grand Prix podium finished with Piastri in first, Norris in second, and Russell in third, respectfully. Russell sort of just chilled for the entire race and coasted to a podium. Chill, Russell. Even before the Japanese Grand Prix, there were headlines heading into the race weekend as it was said that Yuki Tsunoda would be replacing Liam Lawson in the second Red Bull seat alongside Max Verstappen, as it was Yuki Tsunoda's home race. That was the pretty much the thing. But really, in all reality, Liam Lawson had qualified in 19th and 20th, never got anywhere past position 19th in qualifying, and so he was at the very back of the grid. And this, of course, doesn't really cut it for Red Bull. So honestly, they swapped him because he was doing bad. Ultimately, for qualifying, both sort of didn't qualify well. I would say, if you're in a Red Bull, you're expected to finish in the or qualify in the top 10. Yuki Tsunoda did not deliver in that way. In addition to that, Lawson was one position ahead of him in the Racing Bull or VCARB. Um, Ultimately, during the race, Tsunoda and Lawson, both of them didn't finish in points. Lawson did outqualify Tsunoda, as previously said, but Tsunoda improved from 15th position qualifying to 12th by the end of the race, and Lawson fell from 14th down to 17th. And as of recording, it's unclear to me who's going to be racing alongside Verstappen in Bahrain. Uh, as for the race itself, it was pretty uneventful. Besides, there was a crazy pit stop battle that happened here. Effectively, what happened in it was Verstappen and Norris, along with I believe Leclerc, were called into the pits all at the same time, and it effectively became a race in the pits. Who effectively, which team did a pit stop quicker? Verstappen entered his pit stop before Norris, but Norris had a quicker pit stop. They both came out around the same time, and Norris decided to try and overtake Max at the exit of the pit entry and effectively drove off the track onto the grass. This would pretty much hinder McLaren, like possibly getting a really good ending with somebody finishing at first, and of course Norris for the drivers' championship. Of course, race finish wise, Verstappen somehow drove the slower Red Bull than the McLaren to first, with Norris and Piastri finishing second and third behind him, respectively. Of course, after the Japanese Grand Prix is the Bahrain Grand Prix, and this will finally catch us up as this is the last race before the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix this coming weekend. Anyway, so of the topics for the Bahrain Grand Prix, Tsunoda kept his Red Bull seat after his performance in Japan. Should he continue to perform well and not qualify like 19th or 20th like Lawson, he's more than likely going to keep his seat. Bahrain had an interesting Friday. Fernando Alonso's steering wheel came off and his car went off track. Thankfully, that did not result in a crash. He was able to put the steering wheel back on and get back safely. That was in free practice 2. In addition to that, qualifying on Saturday featured an actual incident and crash with Ocon hitting a barrier. Also during qualifying, Gasly somehow earned 5th place, although he was driving the tractor that Alpine gave him. The Red Bulls of Tsunoda and Verstappen continue to struggle, of course, throughout this Grand Prix. They qualified low on the grid and during the race did not get up well on the grid. In addition to this, Lawson was also out in the first session of qualifying. Again, this time in a Racing Bull and not an actual Red Bull. Should this trend continue, he will most likely not get back in that second seat at Red Bull with Max Verstappen. The race itself was an amazing race. Overtakes were happening all throughout the track and the race. Yeah, that was amazing. Piastri was able to convert his pole position, that is his starting position on the grid, in first. People will say he started on pole. He was able to convert his on pole race start to an actual race win. Russell also started the race in second and ended up in second, although he had issues, which we'll get to couple seconds after this, probably. Norris had an amazing start. He started in sixth, and from his launch at the beginning, he went up to third by the end of the first lap of the race. The two Ferraris of Leclerc and Hamilton finished fourth and fifth, respectively. Leclerc might have been able to earn a third place finish had Ferrari not switched them to hard tires, but Ferrari strategy is what it is. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. Gasly fell from his start in fifth and ended in seventh. But this is all good things considered, since Alpine was struggling at the midfield and bottom of the race order in the races of last season. Surprisingly, both Haas's made it to Haas's. Yeah, that's weird. Both Haas's made it into points, with Ocon finishing in eighth and Behrman in 10th. Sainz had to retire because he let's see, what does it say? Sainz had to retire late in the race because his side pod got damaged when he was racing near the middle of the race. If I'm thinking correctly, it was with Tsunoda, but effectively it opened up a small little gap on his side pod, and that continued to get worse, and they had to retire his car to effectively not further damage it. Russell somehow also, alluding to how he stayed in second, his Mercedes was falling apart in like the final 10 laps. The dash on his steering wheel went off. His team had to tell him when he could use DRS. A whole bunch of crazy stuff, sort of similar to Alonso, except he actually kept his steering wheel on and the car was still able to run. So by the end of the race, the three drivers that finished on podium were Piastri, Russell, and Norris, in that order. And with that, we have finally caught up with the current 2025 season. Next episode will be a more in-depth look into whatever happens in Saudi Arabia this weekend. That will hopefully be a better episode, and we will hopefully have good length in it. There'll be enough to talk about. I hope everyone has had a fun time watching this episode, as it has been for me to continue to produce these episodes. With that, if you've enjoyed this podcast or this episode so far, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. It will help a lot, and I shall hopefully see you all next week.